Alright, guys, so today's podcast is going to be 109th from the PFL Music Podcast. This is your host, Pablo Ruiz Vargas. Make sure that you subscribe to my YouTube channel, BitChute and Rumble as well. And I have an account in Gap and pardon the other accounts. If I remember, I'll put them in the description down below. In the meantime, make sure that you subscribe in the platforms I already mentioned. Also, make sure that you follow us in Anchor.fm, which is my main host for my podcast. You can find me in P Alpha Music Podcast /support. Make sure that you support the podcast as well. Today's topic is what is enlightenment? What is enlightenment? I'm gonna just focus right now on the definition of enlightenment. I know people throw this thing too much all over the place, but enlightenment has a very interesting definition, right? Where does it start? Where is the beginning of enlightenment? So basically, enlightenment started in the 18th century. So we have end of the Renaissance period. By the end of the 16th century, then we have the Baroque period, beginning of the 17th century, and then we have the end of the Baroque period / Classical period, which is the Enlightenment period, which is the 18th century. So basically, the movement Enlightenment is just basically opposed against religious indoctrination. So that's the beginning. So it was a movement in the late 17th century, beginning of the 18th century, emphasizing the reason, individualism, rather than tradition. It was heavily influenced by the 17th century philosophers such as Descartes, Locke, Newton. In the musical area, we have even Mozart can give you a little bit of that rebel against society, against the indoctrination, the musical hierarchies, right? Monarchies. So you have all these areas where it's math, science, even religion. Remember, we had the post Protestant movement coming in against the Catholic Church, the Martin Luther movement. We have a lot of things going on. Of course, after that, we have the French Revolution. We end up with the American Revolution with 1776. All these things were happening because we having the enlightenment of the individual. Now, fast forward for now, it's gone all over the place. It's all about liberalism, and I don't want to say too much because I'm gonna get banned here. But basically, exceed liberal doctrines where it's not about the individual, it's more the collective idea. All right. When in reality, Enlightenment thinkers argue that the liberty was a natural human thing, right? So human right, right? And then it's for your right to just have reason thinking and scientific knowledge, and it's not all derived by the state or the church. What? So it's always go to your personal responsibility. Now, why enlightenment is very important for you, right? Why is it? Enlightenment goes because you want to just achieve that area where you're in a higher thinking level, where not everything is believable against just because people say, but you want to just always make sure that you look for the process of results or facts. Okay. It was enlightenment. Of course, it was back then. Was a very progressive movement. Of course, going against the conservative movement of the time, which was the church and religious doctrine. And of course, by the time during this time, and still until today, and you have a lot of discussions on in houses and in families, and we're trying to just make sure that we have the conversation of diverse ideas. What happened is that this got out a little bit of control, since enlightenment is being just used for personal gain, which is political gain, such as using people's emotion about climate change and all this idea just to advance certain things, which is not enlightenment, right? Enlightenment is all about facts and just make sure that you understand the beginning of the problem and the end of the solution of the problem. Okay. Now, what happens today's day with enlightenment is that it forgot to promote the most important part, with the freedom. Now, remember, the only way you can just learn freedom is by knowing the truth, only the truth, and the truth can only be known by constant research of the facts, right? So not emotions, and certainly not collectivism, right? So it's always looking for that individualism that is within you. Okay. Now, why this is important, right? Why this is important and talk about enlightenment, all right? It can be confused that enlightenment is a collective goal instead of an individual goal, and when reality is not either, right? It's more what is the goal? Looking for the truth. Okay, and this is not only in political areas, it could be on religious, on business, health, anything, right? You're always looking for that truth, right? It's not only in your religious side, it's not only in your area of work, it's not only in the area of your arts. It's always looking for the truth in every aspect of your life, right? It's a scientific method that you're using in order for you to look for the truth. Okay? Now, people take alignment as an excuse to just go for human rights. The problem with this is that using the term that has a lot of weight and putting it in something that has nothing to do with enlightenment, you're putting misconceptions into things that can be misconstructed. Because a lot of these things, human rights, I'm not saying human rights are bad, just there's certain areas in society where they use their emotion or human rights just to pursue certain agenda, right? That's not enlightenment, because if you're an enlightened person, you will just seek for the truth in those circumstances. You have to take each situation very differently. Now, can you still be religious and enlightened? That's a great question. Can you still follow God? Can you still be a Christian and be enlightened? Right? That should be a good question. Can you be an atheist and still be enlightened? And the reality is both, right? But I'm gonna speak for myself from my Christian side, okay? Enlightenment comes that when you understand Christianity and you understand God. The problem with God is that people tend to just put God as a human, right? As something that just think like us, it's something that act like us, something that has results like us, or something that can just perceive or think that results will come as we want them to come. The reality is that the image of God, in my opinion, doesn't come that way, right? The image of God comes from a place that is something that it's like the best person you can aspire to be, since the image of God is the highest almighty, right? So you want to make sure that when you imagine becoming that high self, right, you're becoming the best side of yourself in all areas of your life. Okay, it's not going to church only, right, to just sing your hymns and just praise the Lord and stuff. It's not that, right? It's just to make sure where in my areas of my life I can become a better person, right? And that's including the fact that certain areas in Christianity, right? There's some bad plagues where you have to know how to point their fingers in those areas. Now, in order for you to do that, right, you have to understand that you're not practicing those bad behaviors either. Okay, if people are doing bad things in the Christian faith, you should just point it as well. Point the fact that that's bad, right? And you should not only do it on that, you should always do it in other areas as well, right? So when you become enlightened, you're a Christian, right? Now you put boundaries where people should never cross those boundaries, even though they're Christians. Okay, you're not You're basically not accepting bad behaviors, right? You want to make sure that sin and flesh is not taking over you, right? You want to make sure that you're sane in that area, right? Because in reality, mental health, right, comes from mental knowledge. Okay, that's two together, right? You cannot have, if you have problem with mental health, right? That means there's a huge amount of um, disorganized idea, disorganized emotions, disorganized areas where your knowledge has not been connected with what is going on with you. Okay, let me explain myself. So if this one is disorganized, that means that this one is completely disorganized. So there's this connection here where you're missing some puzzles of the piece, right? I'm sorry, you're missing some pieces of the puzzle. Right? You need to do that search. Whether it's religious, whether it's in science, whether it's in the philosophical area, there's a lot of ways that you can just get from where it can just give you an idea just to keep moving forward, right? But of course, the idea is not for you to back up and just be in a corner and just let just by life just eat you up. No, you have to stand up and just confront life, right? Now this is important, right? Because you might have to go to places where you never expected to go, right? Maybe for you to go to a church is not the first thing, right? Because you have some doubts to go to church. That's okay. But maybe sitting down and just reading about church or reading about experience about a spiritual experience, maybe going for another religion, or maybe practicing some spiritual exercise can just alleviate some of the doubts or discomfort, or let's say disconnect between your mind and your body can be fixed through that process. Okay. Now, I'm not saying I'm a professional in this area. This is how I just deal with things, how I think that enlightenment man can go and start things. And other way you can see the enlightenment is, being what we call the Renaissance man. So the Renaissance man, what it does is just he knows about certain things, right? He not only know about playing the piano or the arts, he know about a little bit of politics. He knows a little bit of religion. He knows a little bit of a philosophy, art, engineer, right? He becomes this self-thought kind of person where he starts just developing certain ideas. The best person for this in today's society, you have Joe Rogan, right? Jordan Peterson, right? Steve Bannon, let's say some of the billionaires, Mark Cuban, Warren Buffett. These people are very self-thought, Renaissance kind of guys, right? These know about a lot of things. Not only they know about how to make money, but you can sit down with these people and talk about different things, right? Where you can just get enlightened, have some epiphanies in life, have some new ideas, things starting popping up, right? And it can give you a better way to handle certain problems that you might think that you were alone. Yeah. It's important to understand that you're not alone in this world. You're not alone with your problem. You're not alone with your mental health. You're not alone with depression. You're not alone with a lot of these certain things, right? Now it's important to understand that because you feel this way, people need to feel bad about you. You don't want to be in that position. We don't need to feel bad about you because you have this problem. We all have problems. We all have traumas. We all have these things, but it's up to us to make sure we become enlightened from these experiences. Right? It's important for us to become enlightened from these adventures, these problems. We have to choose that when we have these situations, we're always gonna be on top. Okay, even though we miss a couple fights, that's fine. That's fine. But the more we get into it, the problem, we can just look at the solution. We are one step closer to be enlightened. Okay, you see how that works? Where it's not only an idea from the 18th century, right? Or just looking for progressive or liberal ideas. It becomes something that you can just apply every day. Where not only, of course, it was used very brilliantly back then, but it's a technique that you can just apply in your daily life, right? Make sure not when you're doing your debates, make sure you're clear about what is a debate, right? It's not only screaming emotional stuff. It's not only screaming, and crying. That doesn't make a argument. Make sure you understand what is an argument, okay? Understand a topic, religion, why religion is so important, and what was the purpose of religion. It's not only just idolizing or praising a thing. There's certain function that religious has in humans, how important they are, right? And when you start understanding these things, it does give you a sense of continuation, where now things start making sense. Why are so important? Okay, why exercise so important? What that has the longer term? What is the long term of doing exercises? All these things to understand it, right? It makes you a better person, right? And what we call a open-minded, or let's just use this word, Renaissance guy, like I already used. Okay. So what is the definition of enlightenment? Okay. It's liberty, it's freedom, it's knowledge, it's the highest that you can be, right? And if you can just be the highest you can be with a goal in mind, right? With aspiring for someone. In my case, God is always the one that inspires me to be the best I can be. In your case, you can use someone else or something else to aspire for your higher self. With this was episode number 109 from the P Alpha Music Podcast. Make sure that you subscribe on YouTube, BitChute, and Rumble. And for me, make sure that you share the podcast in Anchor.fm. This is your host, Pablo Ruiz Vargas. With this